And welcome back, everyone, to yet another edition of Going for Two, the official podcast of the Extra Points newsletter. It's brought to you by our dear friends at Home Field Apparel. I am your host, the publisher of said newsletter, Matt Brown, coming in here from beautiful Chicago, Illinois. I'm joined here by my friend and colleague, Bryan Fischer, and I want to open the show, Bryan, with a public apology. Because you probably recall how we ended our last broadcast, right?
I do, but I believe you made a prediction on said coaching market going into the weekend after 3 straight weeks of Power 5 firings.
That is exactly it. And I said, I think we're going to go a week without anybody being fired. And lo and behold, not only did we not go a week without anybody getting fired, we got 2 people fired. One person, I think not exactly a shock. This was something, we had talked both on air and off air. The regime change at Colorado was likely. It was just a question of when the proverbial checks dropped. And then Wisconsin, which was not expected, at least by anybody that I've talked to. I think from people that you've talked to, and that's a program I know decently well. They've made a change. And now we're in October, and there's still a couple of people that are on very hot seats where we could still be doing the same, fire a coach every single week. I don't know how great that is for college athletics governance. I don't know how great that is for team success. It is very convenient, though, for if you were running a weekly podcast.
It absolutely is, and you're right about the shock factor. I mean, I talked with a number of coaches, and it was all kind of disbelief that especially because Paul Chryst was an alum. He was Madison native, grew up not too far from Camp Randall. I mean, like you talk about heavily involved in that program's history over the last couple of decades, and this is a school that has not fired anybody in football for 3 decades. Like we were babies the last time Wisconsin ended up firing a football coach, and I think that does speak stability of that place, but also like how it almost out of left field this was. Now, not to say this was not kind of telegraphed a little bit. I think everybody kind of understood that, especially not only after that Illinois game, but also just kind of the trend of results that Paul Chryst was kind of trending the wrong way, and that could put him under a very warm seat. I don't think anybody expected a firing mode this week. I think that was where the shock was. It was happened very quickly after that Illinois game.
Unquestionably. I mean, you're right on both counts. Typically, if you are the native son or somebody that has a very high degree of cultural fluency or cultural ties to a market, you get the benefit of the doubt, right? This is why Scott Frost got that extra year, or extra 3 games, as it were, right? Because you're the local boy that does good here. And Paul Chryst, I joked about this earlier on news and Extra Points, but the man looks and talks like every third person you meet at Menards. He's a very Wisconsin person, and from the area. And so you typically don't drop those people at the drop of a hat if you are Wisconsin. If Paul Chryst had been the coach at Auburn, maybe different situation, or like an Ole Miss or something, right? The program is unquestionably in decline. I mean, how much Wisconsin football have you watched this year? Because I have watched most of their games.
I have too, especially given that that's a big upset at Washington State that I think kind of pointed to there's something going on here that maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention to. And let's face it, I mean, this is a unique case. You have an alum who's been in the football program, knows that place well, in Chris McIntosh. This is his first really big move as AD, and he's firing an alum and installed another alum in Jim Leonard, which we can kind of get into in just a little bit in terms of him taking over. But, very kind of similar to Nebraska. You have an alum AD who is a All-American football player there, kind of taking over. And this is kind of his first big imprint on the program, is not only showing a beloved alum the door, but also undergoing a potential search here. Now I don't know exactly necessarily if there's going to be a full national search. This is very much an addition for Jim Leonard, and I think everybody kind of views it that way. But I mean, just the shock of the move. I still don't know if that's going to wear off in a couple of weeks at this point. I mentioned it on the HeadCoachU podcast. We had Chris Petersen in from Fox Sports, and he was in disbelief. Bronco Mendenhall was in disbelief that this happened, not just to Paul Chryst, but just to somebody who is so connected to the program.
I want to talk about that Wisconsin, Nebraska parallel here, because I think that may be an apt comparison on a couple of different fronts. One of the things I think is unique and interesting about the Wisconsin football program, and really, I think the Wisconsin athletic department in many ways, is that this is a program that I think has been run with uncommon uniformity in purpose and scheme and culture for virtually my entire lifetime. The Wisconsin football that if you are under 35, that you have grown up watching is in the imprint of Barry Alvarez, either Barry Alvarez football coach, Barry Alvarez administrator. There is a certain kind of way that Wisconsin has won a lot of those games. And I think it's interesting because I think well, not a one-to-one, it's similar to how Nebraska won a lot of football games, and that you are going to have an industry-leading strength and conditioning program, one that, to the best of my knowledge, is not a strength and conditioning program like maybe early 90s Nebraska was, but like, this is part of your, read a book, everybody. Part of that, you want to be a developmental program, right? You're taking lightly regarded guys in your backyard and throughout the Great Lakes. You are coaching them up for several years, and you are producing NFL caliber offensive and defensive linemen, linebackers, and then you hope that you get just enough speed at running back and potentially your defensive backfield to win ball control oriented games. And, a system where you're recruiting 4 or 5 blue chip players, but you're developing really well. You're not having a ton of turnover with your assistants and everything. And it's very clear what the Wisconsin blueprint looks like. And it's been, for 25 years, more or less, very successful. And it was even successful for a while with Paul Chryst. Paul Chryst went to a Rose Bowl. The past couple of years, I want to say they've only finished in the top 25 once since 2017. And this is how Nebraska won a lot of games too. However, that plan sometimes you have to change that plan because of what happens outside of college, outside of your program, right? So for Nebraska, the plan that worked really well in the 70s, 80s, and 90s becomes less successful moving forward because Prop 48 changes. And so the kinds of athletes that you're able to recruit and bring on campus is that pool shrinks because college football shifts to a world where television becomes much more important than ticket sales. And you are in a market where you can't properly take advantage of that. Your recruiting footprint changes. And it seemed like every national change was set in a way that was negative towards Nebraska, even though they had expectations and money and history and fans. When I look at Wisconsin right now, I don't want to take anything away at the fact that they've hired coaches well. They've developed athletes very well. They know exactly what they are, and they've done that very well. I believe a significant part of the reason that they've been able to be so consistent is because they play in the bad division in the Big Ten Conference, and they do not have to play the teams on the other side who recruit better players at most positions as often as they do teams like Northwestern and Minnesota and Illinois, where Wisconsin can reliably out-execute, even though they have similar caliber of talent. That's changing. The Big Ten is going to move to 16 teams, barring something absolutely crazy from the California regions. And UCLA and USC should reliably have better raw talent. Maybe not a better football team, but better raw personnel than Wisconsin will be able to recruit. You're also likely going to move away from divisions. So in the foreseeable future, Wisconsin is going to play Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State and Maryland more often than they've been playing some of these teams here before. So I think there are reasonable questions about what the floor is of this program. You've been able to do one thing in a particular era of college football for a long time. And even at their best, Wisconsin usually got put into a garbage can by Ohio State. Brett Bielema had a couple of good games. They played them close, but I think Ohio State's on like a 7+ game win streak. Purdue's beaten them more often. Michigan's been held at advantage in that series almost as commandingly. So I would have a concern if you're going to fire a guy and spend a lot of money and essentially try to double down on somebody who is equally Wisconsin. Jim Leonhard, as what we know, very good defensive mind, somebody who is in demand, not just among other college programs, but even the NFL to call plays, younger guy. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't think he's coached anywhere other than Wisconsin. He played at Wisconsin. He grew up in Wisconsin. He was hired and molded by the guy that they just fired. So if the blueprint might need to be altered in some way, do you triple down on just executing the same issue before? Do you hope that somebody who is almost as Wisconsin as Paul Chryst can alter the blueprint in a way that's more sustainable? I'm not saying that what they did here was wrong. I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other, but I would have some concerns because when the blueprint changes, like we saw at Nebraska and like we saw at Minnesota, earlier in my childhood with Glenn Mason, guys, you can do a hell of a lot worse than consistently average in a world where the floor of your program falls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think when we talk about Wisconsin, we mention it all the time on the show about alignment. This is a place that is aligned from top to bottom, and not just in the football program, but across all programs. And just the consistency that they have had over these past couple of decades, is a testament to Barry Alvarez certainly, but also the school administration, a lot of the boosters, making sure they are all pulling in the right direction. And I think this move in particular, does have a couple of factors in it, and I think we cannot overlook the fact that Paul Chryst can be a bit of a stubborn man, and I think that was played a little bit into this. I think as much as it is about potentially doubling down with Jim Leonhard on having another alum in there, somebody that can run the program, but Jim brings some different things, and he's a younger guy. Recruiting has slipped off a little bit the last couple of years. I think he's somebody that can look to energize that operation. This is a program that does not have a bajillion analysts or people on that recruiting side.
It's a small staff, a much smaller staff, just personnel wise, than I think you would expect for a program that expects to recruit at a top 30 level with Wisconsin's resources.
So yeah, I think that's something that if you're talking about taking the kind of job and really making it your own, that's something that Jim is going to go to his AD and the rest of the board and say, we need some money for 5 or 6 different analysts, and I think truthfully, Paul Chryst taking kind of only a 10 or $11 million buyout is helpful in that respect. This is actually a pretty palatable coaching change when you look at it from that number versus the kind of $19.5 million number that it was originally supposed to be. And I think that can help this search and can help this program moving forward. But at the end of the day, you got to have energy in recruiting. You kind of got to go after some new targets. And frankly, the recent staff additions just have not worked out there at Wisconsin. I think they're owed kind of largely to Paul Chryst, knowing some people, getting them in, pretty much basically having the same style. And I'm not sure that's going to be the case with Jim Leonhard. And I think that's kind of the big hope is that yes, you can kind of get through this year and hopefully kind of limp along to the finish line. But in terms of those big changes going forward, and beyond proving yourself between the lines on Saturday when it comes to timeout management and how you deal with the end of game situations, you definitely got to learn on the job on this front. But finding quarterbacks, in the transfer portal, making sure that you're developing guys. We know they do offensive line. We know they do running backs just fine. That has not been the issue. Even some wide receivers have come through there, from time to time. But it's all about that quarterback position. They really have not gotten that play consistently these last couple of years with Graham Mertz. And instead of looking around, instead of bringing in other guys, yes, there were certainly some rumors about Caleb Williams going up to Madison in early years, and it's kind of crazy to think about that. But
I completely forgot about that. Yeah.
Bringing in some massive, at least some competition for Graham Mertz to kind of push him in the quarterback room, that really has not happened. And as much as you want to be a developmental program, you also got to win now. And the quarterback is the most important position. So it's going to be interesting to see how Jim Leonhard ultimately wants to evolve on that side of the ball, if he ends up getting the job, and whether this could be a stark change for the program itself, and getting away from simply lining up in that I formation and running off tackle. Like I think if those days might end up being gone, and just some new ideas and some fresh faces on that side of the ball are going to do wonders for Wisconsin. But it is a fascinating experiment because you have 6 or 7 games upcoming in terms of deciding whether you actually want to do a full search right now with Jim Leonhard, and then kind of where you go from there.
And it's not like they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs the rest of this season. So even if, hey, your roster's given up a little bit, or some people are banged up, or they're already kind of thinking about backup plans, with the culture shock shift, like, you can be competitive again and potentially win some of these games to move forward. I think the last thing that's especially interesting to me about this job, and then we can talk about Colorado, we can talk about some of these other places, is on the recruiting front. Because you look at the school that has been, winning 8, 9, 10, 11 games for 25 years, almost every season, that has a lot of NFL alumni, very clearly defined identity, and lots of money, not unlimited money, but a Big Ten check and a gigantic school and everything. This program has never recruited especially well during in the recruiting rankings era. I was just triple checking this while we were talking here. Yes, it has dipped a little bit, but the average within the Big Ten over the last like 12 years has been around sixth. In a really good year, they might sign the fourth or fifth best class. In a bad year or a small class year, they're down 11th or 12th. You might have somewhere between 2 and 6 blue chip players, and they're generally going to be in-state kids, which are more likely to be defenders or linemen than they are skill position players. And then every so often you get like a Logan Brown or somebody who's out of state, but those have been few and far between. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Part of the reason, Wisconsin's really cold. I adore Madison. We were very close to buying a house there. My mom went to school there. We've lived there for a while. It is not always a fun place to be in November, December, and January. Wisconsin as a state doesn't produce a ton of Big Ten caliber guys. And Notre Dame and Ohio State and Michigan are going to be aggressive. So you're going into the Chicago suburbs. You're going into Ohio. You're going into Minnesota and also to Texas and Florida like everybody else is going. So, that is a struggle. Wisconsin is also not a school where you can really recruit JUCOs. I think they've signed one JUCO kid in like the last decade. It is one of the most difficult schools for an athlete to get into academically in the Big Ten. And that's not the same thing as saying it's one of the best schools in the Big Ten. Wisconsin it's a great school. Almost everybody in this league is academically selective. Like, I'm not interested in a pissing match about like, well, is Illinois better than Michigan? Who cares? To take it up with US News. But I know, like, in terms of having a university that is willing to be very accommodating towards people who need to transfer into the program or who maybe don't have as many math credits or need some more flexibility, this is not a place that offers that. It's not Stanford, but it's way stricter than Ohio State, and which limits a little bit what you could potentially do there in the portal. And Madison is. I was just joking about this with my buddy Richard Johnson over at Sports Illustrated. There's a couple of places that I think are. I think the best way I can put this. There are a few college towns in college sports that are very attractive to a middle-aged sports writer. Fort Collins is one of these places. Madison is one of these places. I'm in that demographic there myself. Boulder, Colorado, which we'll talk about there in a second, is one of these places. They're places where guys in their mid-30s or early 40s, mostly white guys, a lot of dads, would love to spend 3 days. And you go there and you spend time and you think, this place is awesome. Surely you should be able to recruit here, without realizing that maybe the kind of things that make a campus or a city or a region attractive to a guy that owns Wilco on vinyl versus a running back might be different things. And Wisconsin, like many other institutions in the Big Ten, will face some challenges in that regard. So I don't know, even if you bring in a dynamic guy, and it's not like Wisconsin's booster culture is ready to turn into Auburn's or Texas A&M's tomorrow. They haven't found oil in Green Bay. I don't know if you can ever make this a place where you're recruiting at a top 15 level. You need some more staff. You need to be creative there, but I don't know if that ever changes the DNA of being a developmental program, unless we're looking at this 4 years from now and climate change, forces population to move back north again, and now all the good football players are in Appleton. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know if they're going to Appleton for that one, but I agree with
real estate. Yeah.
I agree with your points. I think it is important to say that in the NIL era and one-time transfer, you know what? Because you are a Big Ten team, because you offer those opportunities, I think the calculus does change, slightly in terms of what you're able to offer, kind of that recruiting base that you're able to. Yeah, this is always going to be a program that is going to lean into recruiting those big offensive linemen that they know that they can develop over time. That's really in this era in particular one of the biggest strengths that the program has is because they can lean on that. You cannot get left tackles out of the portal. Every coach in the country would like one, and they do not, they rarely go into the portal. And I think in an NIL era where you can attract a quarterback perhaps to be that big man on campus, when you can get a wide receiver or two, especially from the group of 5 level that wants to play in those Big Ten stadiums, I think Wisconsin can be a higher ceiling program. Now, not to say that, in a newly constructed, multi-team division, whatever divisionless structure that they're going to have in the Big Ten going forward, that's not to say that they're going to consistently make it to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game or consistently be right there with Ohio State or Michigan. But, I don't think think it's wrong to think that, they could end up in the right circumstances. Maybe they end up hosting a playoff game or playing in one in an expanded 12-team format. They could finish third in the Big Ten and be one of those teams in that mix. I think that is kind of the ceiling at this point, and I think going for it and juicing things up ahead of this era, you can kind of understand where they're coming from. But it's still going to take some work. This is a program that has been so set in its ways, and I think to Chris McIntosh's credit, he's saying, what we want to do better. We're going to get left behind at this point if we do not make a change now. And I think that was a lot of that in terms of his heart to heart with Paul Chryst is making changes to make the program better. And we'll see how it plays out. It's going to be a fascinating case study, and really kind of reaffirms, that this is such a crazy coaching carousel. It might not be the big names and the blue bloods that we had like the last couple of years. You had your Texases and USCs and Florida's open up, but this could portend a little bit of chaos at programs that are yearning to kind of break out of some slumps and look ahead towards really doing more in an era where you can change your team overnight. We're seeing that right now with the USC. I think when I went in and evaluated USC for all of our Athlon preseason magazines and doing stuff for Fox Sports, like I looked at USC, it's like, they could probably win the Pac-12, but now we're talking about they're being college football playoff contenders. And that's after bringing in like 26, 27 guys through the transfer portal. So it can be done. Now, a little bit of a different test case given USC compared to say an SMU or some of these other coaching changes that have happened recently. But I think the amount of time and patience that a lot of these programs are having for kind of waiting around to get over to winning, I think that is slowly being thrown out the door, and we're seeing that with a lot of these coaching changes right now.
I want to talk about a place where you are unlikely to turn over the roster and add 28 people and then immediately compete for for a college football playoff bid that is also opened up. But before we do, because this is a natural segue here as we are shifting conversations, to quickly remind people that this show is sponsored by our dear friends at Home Field Apparel. They are our friends in Indianapolis. They make clothes. They make clothes with vintage college sports designs and logos that you found from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, or maybe the 70s and the 80s. They make t-shirts. They make hoodies. They make stickers. They make sweatpants. They are obscenely comfortable. And that's why it's almost the only thing that I wear during the day if I'm not doing any Connect videos or any kind of on-camera work where I need to appear to be a little bit more of a serious professional. This is generally what I'm wearing. Today I am wearing the Script Illinois shirt, rocking the in-state pride here. We've got the Fighting Gamecocks. It's good of you to support the Cock Commander here on this program.
Proud Collegiate Sports Connect partner as well. So just throwing that out there.
You are a consummate professional, much more so than I am. But we're glad to shill for Home Field because they are our friends and they've been supporting our friends and they make really great stuff. They're about to drop a Wyoming collection. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I understand that there are people that adore the Wyoming color combination. I am not one of those people. This is not a collection where I am going to be tempted to spend all of my money. However, for people that do like vintage Wyoming cowboy stuff and look good in brown or look good in yellow and brown, those people do exist. The Stephen Godfreys of the world, you're going to love this because they've got some really cool, fun old fonts, old-timey Pistol Pete's, or I'm not sure. I assume every cowboy-looking mascot is Pistol Pete. I don't know if that's his actual name. You're going to love it. What I am going to spend some money on the ECU collection, the official adopted G5 program of Matt Brown and Extra Points MB. You can get all your own stuff here too by going to homefieldapparel.com and using promo code Extra Points to save 15% off that first order. And if you would like to get your stuff, your IP involved with Home Field, drop me a line. I'm at matt@extrapointsmb.com. I don't remember. I think they have Colorado, right?
They do. I have a Colorado shirt, as a matter of fact, somewhere upstairs in my closet.
The Run Ralphie Run shirt. That's right. I have the thing pulled up right now. Lots of cartoon buffalo, and also a great color scheme. So Colorado's open. That's the other gig. Colorado has not had 2 consecutive winning seasons in football since like the 90s.
Basically this decade, or this century.
Yeah, it's been a tough place. It has not been a place that has indefinite money. It has not been a place that had indefinite resources or an indefinite initial recruiting pool. They probably had to reach a little bit to hire Karl Dorrell, and we understand why that happened, and that clearly didn't work out despite the kind of one flash in the pan during the COVID year. Brian, I mean, I don't think either of us are surprised that Colorado did this. Just this team, I want to be polite. This team sucks right now. They are the worst team in the Power Five. They are really, really bad. They don't have to be really, really bad forever. Where do you think they should go?
Well, I think they got a number of directions, and they actually have options this time. I think when they hired Karl Dorrell, everybody could have predicted how it was going to play out. I mean, he just did not ring of like number one excitement. There was just zero of that in the Karl Dorrell era. And Karl's a great guy. Like you understand, how they wanted to think. Maybe this is a stability hire. And
Sure.
given everything that happened, but just in terms of kind of reaching above. I think the pandemic season, a bit of a flash in the pan, finishing 4-2 there, but it has just been it's been tough, and I think a lot of it has underscored the limitations of the institution itself. I mean, yeah, 20 years ago, I mean, in 2001, they almost came close to playing for the national title, and yet here they are. I think a lot of it has gone down to yes, coaching misses, but it's tough to recruit there. I mean, you gotta go into California, you gotta go into Texas, and I think they've started to they have not targeted kind of the right kind of folks. They haven't even really recruited well in their own backyard. I think they've only gotten a couple of the handful of blue chip prospects that come out of Colorado. They're really not considering, Colorado. They're going to
Yeah.
Texas, they're going to USC or something like that. If you're
Oklahoma, Ohio
Oklahoma,
State, Stanford. Yeah.
a lot of those programs have had more success in the state of Colorado recruiting than the quote unquote flagship university. And so I think when that is end up happening, it kind of compounds the issue. And you go back to their success back in the 90s. I mean, they were recruiting kind of under the radar kids, especially out of California, a lot from central LA, and those parts of the country. And they kind of went away from that. They just have not resonated in certain parts that they once did. And it's tough because I think everybody, and this is going back to your earlier point about a kind of a disconnect between what some folks in our age bracket might be looking for. We all love Boulder. It's one of the great places to go and visit and see a game. I mean, you got one of the more picturesque stadiums there. You got Ralphie running. It's great for us as a viewpoint on college football, but a little different if you're, say 17 years old and you're getting recruiting and going out to a station. But it's going to be a very unique job. I think they do have options. Certainly weren't you have the Illinois shirt on. Ryan Walters, their DC, a Colorado alum. His name is going to get thrown up quite a bit in terms of this job, and would be very curious to see how firmly he's going to be in the mix, because I do think they would like somebody that is fairly experienced, because this is a tough job. I think I know my other podcast partner, Bronco Mendenhall's name is going to come up quite a bit. I think that would be a pretty good fit, in terms of what he's done in terms of developing talent. Obviously has all those connections out west. I think that's the town of Boulder would kind of embrace him, and he would love living there. So I think there's those type of coaches as well. And I think there's just a number of different candidates. So you have Matt Ince from North Dakota State. Those type, maybe a little bit of a lower level, but Colorado could look to him. So at least they have options this time. And I don't think they necessarily had a whole lot of options after Mel Tucker left, but they certainly landed on the wrong one. And this was a change that I think everybody could end up seeing coming, because you're right, they were, if not the worst Power 5 team, I think they had a case to be one of the worst teams in all of FBS this year. I mean, not at all competitive. And, even in a Pac-12 that you kind of look at that lower tier, they should be competitive, with the Arizonas and Arizona States of the world. And they're really not when you look at them on the field.
Yeah. I know my friends at Split Zone Duo have talked about this before, and this sounds like something that I would love to sink a couple of days into in the off season. But I was just triple checking here. As a state, Colorado really doesn't produce much really top end talent, and by that I mean you're going to have like 2 or 3 4-star kids in the consensus over the course of a year, but generally only one of them is going to be in the top 300. So like your top player is somebody that would be considered a developmental prospect at a place like Oregon or Michigan or Ohio State. And Colorado has not been competitive there. They've rarely been competitive for the top 5. Like almost all of those people have gone out of state. And it's interesting because I think over the last decade, the quality and the depth of high school football in other places in the Intermountain West has gotten better. Arizona, it's gotten a lot better as that state has grown. It's gotten a lot better in Utah, where there's, I think, some meaningful depth, even if there's not an enormous difference at the top of level. And Colorado is not a tiny state, so I don't know if that's a product of who's moving to Colorado or what the school systems are looking like. I would need to consult local subject matter experts, but certainly having that, which is already split 2 other ways with other in-state institutions and the rest of the Pac-12, and I don't know what conference you're going to be in 5 years anyway. That is a challenge. I would agree with you. I think we've mentioned this before. I know I've said this on radio in Utah. That's very interested in what Bronco Mendenhall does next. I think he'd probably fit pretty well here too, because the advantage for this kind of job is you are going to have a more patient administration, because even in the transfer portal era, I don't think anybody's expecting Colorado to win 8 games next year. You have to be better than you are right now, but that's not that hard, because right now you're not even a 500 team in Conference USA. So if you just get to like average,
that's the thing that I think, is so frustrating for Colorado fans, is like the base is so low right now. Like at least if you're you're flirting with bowl eligibility and you're going 5-7 and then 7-5 and you're kind of fluctuating there. That is so much better than what they have been right now. Like they have not even hit that kind of bar. And I think that's what ultimately is so frustrating for the Buffs fans out there, is like, not only did you have success, you won a national title, back in the 90s, you have that history, that rich history, of having success. It's not that you're thinking, oh, we can get back to there. No, I don't think anybody is thinking, all right, we're going to win a national title again there in Boulder. But they do expect like some level of a decent floor to where you can at least be consistently competing for bowl games. And I think it's a program that can be doing that with the right coach in place.
I don't think there's any Power 5 program where fans could not dream of making back-to-back like Insight Bowls or whatever the generic P57, the Jimmy Kimmel Christmas Bowl Classic presented by MasterCard or whatever it is, right? Like you should, if you have Power 5 TV money and Power 5 resources, even if you're Illinois or Indiana, I think that is a reasonable goal. Like we should be, or Rutgers, like that, that we with the right coach, we think we can go 7-5 2 years in a row, that we can go bowling, even if it's 500 3 out of 4 years. And they have not gone to back-to-back bowls since I was in high school, 2004, 2005. So I think it's possible. So that you're looking at somebody who is going to come in there and say, like, I would be surprised, knowing what I know about Bronco, and you know him better than I do, for him to come in and say, well, all right, we're going to sign 2 top 30 classes. We're going to grab these 2 hot shots from the transfer portal, and we're going to try to do X, Y, or Z. I think it would be more likely we're going to try to rebuild the culture. We're going to try to get some high schoolers. We're going to try to demonstrate an identity. And then by year 3 or 4, with these people that we've coached up and have kept with the program, then we'll maul you and win some 17-3 game where we put, Oregon in hell.
You say that, but with Bronco in particular, I mean, as much as he is a defensive guy and he's known for building that side of the ball up, I mean, he's had really good offenses dating back to his time from BYU. So like he understands that it is yin and yang in college football, and it's not just focusing on one side of the ball. You got to be able to put up points, and I think it's all about timely stops. And I think he would kind of say the same thing right now. It's you're going to get into a couple of 45-42 type of shootouts. Can you come up with that one stop to kind of hang on to the ball last? And his teams have been able to do that in the past. And I think that kind of also speaks to really the Colorado job, the Wisconsin job, and this job market too, is the fact that if you're losing, it's one thing. If you're losing bad and you're so not entertaining as a product, that puts the pressure on head coaches even more. Like the margin for error, if you're winning like a 62-60 type of game, and if you're winning a 17-14 type of game, like there are 2 different kinds of pressures. And I think it does speak to that. Hey, this is an entertainment product. You got to be entertaining as a football program. And I think those coaches that are kind of a little bit head in the sand, that want to say, you know what, we're going to be ground and pound. We're going to control the clock, and we're going to eke it out on the last possession. You really cannot do that in college football anymore.
You need to win more than anything. But you are 1,000% right that this is an entertainment business. I think this is definitely true of basketball, and it's true in other sports here too. And if you can't win, you have to not be boring. I think of Purdue this year. Do you think Purdue is that good of a football team this year? Like I would say they're decided they're a football team. But when I watch a Purdue game so far, everything happens all of the time. Could there be a busted play that goes in 70 yards in either direction at some point? Sure. Will the quality of every play that I watch on either side of the ball be excellent every single time? No. Do I have a compelling reason to watch at 11 o'clock kickoff? Yes. I don't think you necessarily have to be a team that runs 100 plays and scores 60 points a game to be entertaining, but not very good. I think if you are a defensive-oriented team that prioritizes defensive havoc and does that well, like could I see a world, theoretically, a world where UMass under Don Brown becomes an entertaining bad team because they get 7 sacks a game, and they're either going to get you for defensive a negative play or give up a 100-yard touchdown. Like that's still fun, and people know what they're getting, and they're still connecting to it. To be the platonic ideal of the bland 11 a.m. Jefferson Pilot ACC game or Big Ten kickoff game, where it's 12-7, or basically what Iowa offense is right now. Iowa might still win 8-9 games even, and nobody is having a good time. Not the people on Iowa, not the people watching Iowa, not the people collecting checks from Iowa. It is a dental appointment of a football game, and that's not a business, which is really what all of this stuff is, you know?
Oh, well, you mentioned Iowa. I had a bit of a conversation with somebody who's coached in the Big Ten, and just saying maybe this actually puts some additional pressure on Kirk Ferentz to make some changes, because like what,
Okay.
he is definitely very insular and focused on being very Mr. Iowa there, but like Paul Chryst, nobody saw this type of firing coming, and maybe the pressures of that, the changing nature of the job, the fact that Iowa is not just going to be able to feast on playing the Illinois and Northwesterns of the world as much as they have been. This is going to be a new era for the Big Ten, and you kind of wonder, is Kirk Ferentz equipped to make those changes, not just offensively, but just kind of in general for the program itself. And I think it's going to be very interesting. Beth Goetz just recently hired as their deputy AD. I know a lot of people think she might be the person that takes over for Gary Barta eventually as AD. So you kind of wonder, is this enlivening and new blood kind of coming into the department going to be possibly pretending some changes at places like Iowa? I think there are a lot of jobs out there that are kind of in this same vein of Wisconsin, of an Iowa. Even if they're having success, the nature of these jobs are changing, and that's added pressure to not only the head coaches, but to everybody in the department as well.
I don't want to get angry emails about this, but I would respectfully say I think your thought process is correct at almost everywhere but Iowa, where
Well,
we know.
yeah, I think we know Iowa well enough to know that
Yeah,
this
right.
is a pipe dream, but you kind of just in the back of your mind, if you would have said the same thing about Wisconsin 6 weeks ago, right?
I would have, right? And in fact, it's funny. Like during that Illinois game, I tweeted like the Charles Barkley gif about we are going to have a dialogue, and I said Wisconsin, it's time. And when I tweeted that, I wasn't thinking you need to fire Paul Chryst right now, but it would be you can't keep doing what you're doing here, and whether that means changing some assistant coaches or changing your scheme or having the humility to acknowledge that it's no longer 1974 and you might have to do something a little bit different. Whether that's, I don't know, like hypothetically a program like Cal that, hey, maybe that needs a different offensive identity. I mean, like that's kind of what Syracuse did, right? Like they made that, they made some pretty substantial, changes there on both on that coaching staff, and now they're much more watchable. But Iowa, of course, given multiple opportunities over the past couple of years for the Ferentz administration to show some introspection and think maybe we should change some things, not just schematically, but culturally, the kind of environment we foster for our athletes to make them feel welcome and accepted. What we saw was basically doubling down on all those things. Look, the man has his kid calling plays, and Gary Barta gave both of them tenure and directly oversees Brian Ferentz instead of to get around like nepotism laws. I will believe that Iowa, as we know it, modernizes when people are no longer working there. Like I look at that as like 1988 Soviet Union. It will have to fall apart from within, and then things will change. But for everyone else that doesn't exist in that bubble, I think you're onto something. The stakes have raised.
Well, I mean, things can change from within. They're in Iowa City. I mean, you look at just if they keep this up in terms of just the offensive malaise after 6 or 7 weeks, and maybe it's more of a regression to the mean, and that they're winning more 6-6, 7-5 type of season. You know what? Maybe there are some internal pressures that get added to the mix, because it is going to be a new era for a lot of these Big Ten schools. And I think it's a much more competitive league. You look at an Illinois under Brett Bielema. I mean, they have completely kind of changed over these last couple of years. The system is in place, and now they're rolling. And I think they probably, if you give them a little truth serum, especially given that they're ending in their lone loss, they probably think they should be ranked right now and in the top 25 and undefeated, especially after beating Wisconsin the way they did. But this is it's just a different era for a lot of coaches, and I think that's kind of why we talk so much about burnout. And the coaches are feeling it too, and they're feeling these additional pressures. The thing for them, they are well compensated for feeling all of these things, unlike us right here on this here podcast.
Yeah, right. Paul Chryst, good guy. Paul Chryst negotiates a lower buyout, still going to walk away with more than $10 million. And will
and some lump sums too. That's
right in a briefcase. And if he wanted a staff job for another P5 school, I think he could get it. If he wants to go get on Lake Mendota and do nothing but drink cold beer and fish for the rest of his life, he can do that too. And then that's fine, right? When we burn out, we don't get that. If you subscribe to Extra Points, maybe we could, but we're not at that point yet. We're probably going to do this whole song and dance next week. We did not plan when we sat down here for our schedule and what we're working on the next couple of days to just do a recap of who got their ass fired every week and what they're going to be doing. But that does seem to be where we are. We are running out of coaches who are obviously on the hot seat, I think, with maybe one obvious exception. But if Paul Chryst can be fired, maybe some G5 coaches can be fired too, because we are now heading into the time of year where historically an early firing might occur. Brian, please.
Well, I was going to say, should we set the number right now? Should we do like I'm trying to think if in my Vegas mind, would I set it at 0.5, or if I had set it right at 1? What you would say in terms of coaches firing. Not that we enjoy reveling in this type of conversation, because we're talking about a lot of impact that goes on for these programs, for these fan bases, for these assistants, their families, all that stuff. But this is the kind of topic right now in college football. And I do feel like it's setting it at 1 is probably a pretty good number right now.
Yeah, I would push. I think next week it will be 1. But you listened to me last week. This is not the area where I am. I mean, if you were asking me about Division II schools reclassifying, right, I might be able to give you a more educated guess, which is one of the things that I am writing about.
We might be talking about that in next week as well.
That if you are a paid Extra Point subscriber, you'll be able to get some more information about exactly that this week. I know of a couple of institutions that are in that process. We have some updates both in the Midwest and in New England and potentially elsewhere in the country. I shared an explainer earlier this week explaining what multimedia rights are, which is something I think would like to continue to do a couple other times here at Extra Points. Multimedia rights are not broadcast rights. The MMR contract is not the football game that you see on television, but for most schools outside of the Power 5 elite, this is actually the biggest contract that they get. And we're explaining what gets sold there, what that means, what you as a educated fan, or if you're an administrator, you better know what MMR is. If you don't, don't tell me. Go look it up first. But you can find that Extra Points along with some other things. Brian, beyond your coach chats, what else are you working on that people need to be seeing right now?
Yeah, I had another edition of HeadCoachU drop this week. But before, as you're listening to this podcast, it is available wherever you are listening to this one, whether it be Spotify, YouTube, Apple, whatever it means. We had Chris Petersen on, a great conversation with him. We talked back about his UC Davis days and learning from that staff and a lot of how he kind of ran his program, how he recruited folks. Really just kind of going on the state of the industry as well. And I even asked Chris if he's kind of like Bronco Bronco. He's taken a pause. It's been 3 seasons now, but would he ever look to get back into him? So if you want to know the answer to that, and perhaps your school has an opening, definitely check out the latest edition of HeadCoachU. We obviously got going for 2 here, rolling right along, and then plenty of stuff on Collegiate Sports Connect and Fox Sports. I got a couple columns up per week on that one as well.
If you are enjoying the show, by all means, please leave us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, comments on YouTube to help boost that algorithm. All of those are greatly appreciated. You can find everything that we're doing here at extrapointsmb.com as well. We will be back in touch with you next week. Thanks for listening. We'll catch up with y'all soon.